Today, we'll be discussing Truman's mental health issue on campus and how to solve it during a pandemic. Here is my ID. Okay. Glenn Close, an American actress, once said, "What mental health needs is more sunlight, more candor, and more unashamed conversation." Mental health is an important topic that needs to be discussed more often than it currently is. At Truman, it is well known that there is a negative stigma surrounding mental health. With long, cold, dark winters, loads of stressful schoolwork, and going to school amidst a pandemic, it can be really hard to maintain positive thoughts throughout this time. This issue is also not helped by administrations constantly cutting funding to the counseling services provided to students. To help solve this seemingly never-ending issue, we propose to have a pet adoption event on campus to not only help students find a pet companion for emotional support, but to also help the Adair County Humane Society and our community as a whole. In 2018, Truman had the highest number of students seeking counseling services. The school did recognize this and trained over 40 faculty members in identifying suicide crisis in the classroom. This is based on Truman's annual report for the 2017-2018 school year. Also in this report, it is found that 44% of students received about 2 to 5 sessions per year at their counseling services, whereas about 21% seeked 6 to 10 sessions per year. Through this analysis, it can also be seen that each grade level represented about 1/4 of the population, whereas not one grade level seeked counseling services more than any other, showed in this graph here, excluding grad students. Through further analysis, when regarding crisis services, out of the 144 crisis cases, 58 were due to emotional distress, whereas 62 were due to suicide ideas and gestures, the highest two categories out of all of these. In Truman's annual report, they also had a national survey comparing 47,948 clients and their counseling services experiences at their school. Within this graph, there's different areas regarding depression, anxiety, and eating disorders, where almost every single one saw a huge positive change from students when they first entered from when they left. As you can see here in the academic distress area, they only saw a change about 52.5% in clients with moderate and or elevated distress. Whereas with clients with only elevated distress, they only saw a positive change of 32.4%. This number is significantly lower than all the rest, as you can see here. This survey and data shows that when students are seeking counseling services, even after going, they still are not satisfied and they still are receiving amounts of stress from their schoolwork. Also based on Truman's report, when individuals were asked if they received emotional support from their family at home, 59.8% of clients completely or somewhat disagreed with this statement. When asked if they received emotional support from their friends or peers, 69.4% somewhat or completely disagreed. This shows that students are not getting the emotional support they need from their friends and family. Based on this data, we highly suggest holding this pet adoption event so that way students can receive this emotional support that they're clearly lacking from their pet companion.
So according to the Princeton Review in 2019, Truman was ranked 12th in the nation of a list of universities with unhappiest students. Princeton Review based this ranking on how strongly students marked disagree to the statement, "I'm happy at my school," on a survey sent to around 400 schools. Studies have shown that if a university ranks on the Princeton Review's unhappiest student list, that application rates can decrease by as much as 5% at that school. If you ask students from Truman to give specific reasons why they think Truman has so many unhappy students, many will cite the increasing number of mental health cases among students on campus, and also the inability of the university counseling services to keep up with that demand. So according to the University Counseling Services website, there are currently only 5 staff members at the University Counseling Center, and the care that those 5 staff members are able to provide students is quite limited as well. So the UCS website, or the University Counseling Services, states that student cases involving things such as a longstanding history of serious maladaptive behaviors which hinder effective work in sessions, certain psychiatric disorders, severe self-injurious behaviors or suicidal intentions, and any treatment that requires hospitalization long-term or any rehabilitation, such as chronic substance abuse or more severe cases of eating disorders. And there's a longer, more detailed list on their website, but just to give a quick rundown of that. So, according to another list of universities with the least happy students, this one from 2018 from the website Poets and Quants, Truman ranked 10th nationwide. So I believe that this website used data that was obtained from the 2018 Princeton Review list, which is the same ranking as the 2019 one, just from 2018. And those results, again, are based off of how strongly the students disagreed to being happy with their university. And so Truman making the top of this list again for consecutive years in a row shows that the issue of unhappy students on campus is a consistent problem that should be taken seriously. So it is possible that the inability for the counseling center to keep up with mental health problems on campus is the low amount of funding that's allocated to the UCS from Truman's overall budget. So every year, Truman holds an open session that outlines the budget from the previous year and proposes the budget for the next. For the 2018 to 2019 school year, it was proposed that each student pay an additional $10 for their health center fee that comes out of their tuition every year. So that proposal was approved, and it was projected that it would bring an additional $125,000 a year. So with this funding, the UCS intended to hire a counselor with higher qualifications in order to expand the counseling center's scope of care and what they're able to treat. The UCS did acknowledge that they do need to hire more counselors in order to really solve the problem, but they mentioned that they still could not afford to do so even with this increased fee. So hiring only one higher qualified counselor was their best option. So the budget for the Universal Counseling Services is a part of the Student Services category in Truman's overall budget. So this also includes things like admissions and intercollegiate athletics and some other health services and testing services. From 2016 to 2018, the amount of money allocated to student services had increased by a little over $1.5 million. The amount of money allocated to, for some reason, the 2019 data was not available to view online, so I'm not really sure what the data was for 2019 or how much that budget was specifically. But in 2020, the student services budget decreased by approximately $3 million. And the student services overall percentage of the Truman budget went from being 10.75% in 2018 to 9.8% in 2020. And it is hard to say how much of that student services budget is allocated specifically to the Universal Counseling Services, because that information is not viewable to the public, at least from what I found. But it is probable that the counseling center budget has also increased alongside the overall student services budget.
So for the 2018-2019 school year, an increase to the student health fee was approved. The fee increase was $10 per student. Total revenue of this increase was approximately $125,000. So the counseling service intended to use this revenue to hire a new counselor with higher qualifications. But despite this increase, the health center, the overall budget allocated to the health center for 2018 decreased in 2020. And here's a nice little chart that illustrates this. As you can see from year in the right hand or left hand column, and then budget in the middle column, there's a substantial decrease from the year 2018 to 2020. So the Adair County Humane Society is where around 50% of adoptions come from in the Kirksville area. And this includes from students at ATSU and from our very own Truman State University. So the shelter is always looking for help, but due to the pandemic, they aren't able to take on any new volunteers. And they've actually gone as far as to send home most of their employees, leaving them with just 4 staff members to take care of the pets in the facility. Their adoptions usually spike during the end of, and the beginning of the year, which mostly with mostly students coming to adopt cats in the fall and dogs in the winter. However, adoption events continue in order to find pets new homes. So the Humane Society is learning to move its events to a more on internet facilitated online event style. So our adoption event, our plan is to host an adoption event in order to improve mental health on campus, and this will have to accommodate public health and safety concerns due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So in order to do this, our event will be hosted virtually via Zoom. We will advertise for our adoption event by chalking, placing signage around campus, and notifying the appropriate media outlets. This includes KTRM, the Index, and SAB. So in order to host a successful adoption event, specific animals will need to be properly showcased in order to show off the strengths of their personality. So, appealing photos, short written bios about the pets, and fun facts will all be conducive to this goal. So, in addition to this, we want a smaller number of animals rather than a larger number during the event because this will also encourage adoption. Because, according to the National Center for Shelter Dogs, this has the effect of not overwhelming the viewers who come to the event, which could be a very bad thing that turns them off to adopting. So, ample information about how to officially adopt the animals will also need to be provided in a multitude of formats. It will need to be in writing, it will need to be in the advertisements, and it will need to be said verbally throughout the event so that there is no chance of miscommunication. So, if what our research shows about the effect that animals have on mental health is true, then we expect our event to be helpful in curtailing mental illness at Truman. Because according to data compiled by Hill's Pet Nutrition and Adoption Events, having an adoption event increases the likelihood of pet adoption. For example, in 2018, one national cross-shelter event called Clear the Shelters Day resulted in 100,000 new pet adoptions across the US in just one day. And this is pretty substantial.
The effects of pets on your both mental and physical health has been investigated by a lot of researchers in the past. So I'm going to be presenting some of that research here now to you. The first study I'm going to be talking about is a study that was done by Karen Allen and her associates, which was looking at how pet dogs, the presence of the pet dogs, can help reduce stress responses when you're in a stressful situation. So what Karen Allen did was she had some women volunteers come to her laboratory and do a standard stressful task. And then she had them do it again when they were in their homes with either their dog present or their human friends or spouses present. And what she found from this was that when their dogs was present, their stress responses were lower than when they did it alone. But when their friends or spouses were present, they had higher physical stress responses. And so her explanation for this is that your pet is a non-judgmental source of support that's just there to encourage you and won't judge you if you do badly on your stressful task. While your friend, you see them as sort of a judging support. So like they'll be happy if you do well, but they'll judge you if you don't do well. So it makes it more stressful for you. So here's the results from her experiment. You can see in the graphs that when the volunteers were performing the tasks, they had much higher stress responses, such as skin conductance or blood pressure or pulse rate, than when they were resting. And the black bar is the stress responses when the pet was present, and those are always much lower when the people were at home than the stress responses when their friends were present and when just the experimenter was present. So Karen Allen decided to do another study, and she selected a bunch of stockbrokers who lived alone and didn't currently have a pet. And she picked stockbrokers because they have a stressful job, trying to make sure everything works out. And so she had half of her volunteers adopt a pet dog, and then she measured their blood pressure when they were stressed, and she found that the ones who had adopted dogs had lower increases of blood pressure when they were stressed than those who didn't adopt the dogs. So this just shows that having a pet dog can help decrease how stressed you are when something bad happens. And this is kind of important for college students because they also have really stressful lives. So whenever a stressful event happens, you're going to have like increased blood pressure and all these things that make it worse for you. But having a pet would decrease these negative responses and make the stressful events less bad for the people with the pets. And she found something that I thought was interesting. She says, interestingly, we also found that people who reported the fewest social contacts and friends benefited from the companionship of their pets the most. So this is pretty relevant to where we are right now with the coronavirus because a lot of people aren't getting nearly the amount of social exposure to other people they would normally be getting because of like quarantining or just not having nearly as many social events to go to. So having pets now would be even more beneficial than it would be generally. So then in another study that was more about people's physical health, the experimenter Bruce Hetty and his researchers called random houses in Australia and asked them a lot of questions, such as whether or not they had a pet, and then how often they went to the doctor, and whether or not they took medication to see if having a pet would correlate with better physical health. And he found that the people who didn't have a dog or a cat tended to visit the doctor much more often than those who owned a dog or a cat or both. And that also the people with a pet were less likely to be on medication than those without a pet. So this is just kind of like a fun fact that says that having a pet correlates with having better health, although it doesn't necessarily cause it, I guess. And then he also said that pet owners reported being less lonely than non-pet owners and that it was comforting to be with their pets when things went wrong, which again is really important right now because people are more likely to be lonely. So having the pet around can be extra helpful.
Hi, I'm Lily Pettypool, and I will be talking to you about Pets and Social Capital. Pets and Social Capital is a telephone survey which was done by Lisa Wood. In this survey, Lisa compares pet owners' quality of life to the quality of life of non-pet owners, as well as their life within a community. In this survey, Lisa found that owning a pet also helps owners have a positive view of the people around them, as well as improving their social capital. Pet owners will perceive their neighbors as more friendly than non-pet owners. Pet owners feel like their pets provide them more opportunities to interact with those in their community, as well as making it more likely for the owner to interact and make favors with those in their community. And as you can see on this table, for each category, pet owners score higher than non-pet owners will on their willingness to do favors. So they're more willing to look after the house while their neighbor is away. They'll take care of a neighbor's pet by feeding it, walking it. They're more willing to lend items or tools. They're more willing to listen to the problems, help with odd jobs. They're more willing to provide transport to anywhere. They're more willing to care for their child or any family member. And Lisa found that when asked about mental health problems diagnosed by a doctor in the past 12 months, pet owners were less likely to report a diagnosis of depression or anxiety, but the differences were still not statistically significant. Now, it may not be incredibly statistically significant. We still find all this data incredibly interesting and important to look at. And as you can see on this table, pet owners have a higher self-rated health, decreased anxiety and depression, a decreased sense of loneliness, an increase in friendliness towards neighbors, and increased social support, less difficulty getting to know those in your community, and an increase in willing to participate in most activities such as volunteer work, school activities, coaching, and sports. From this, researchers found that pet owners have higher scores on social capital and civic engagement. So overall, it's been found that pets tend to actually have better influence on pet owners' life experience compared to non-pet owners. So pets do help increase your quality of life, although it's not by extreme amounts, it's still by some visible amounts that we can see. And so if it's just that little bit more, why shouldn't we be helping our students with just a simple thing?
Okay, so on to our next slide, which is basically talking about table 2, which is health and social capital related outcomes by pet ownership. And basically, researchers found that pet owners had higher scores on social capital and civic engagement scales, and pet owners generally reported being less stressed and lonely. And so we can see that a little more in depth here if we look at the slide, that pet owners being in this left column and non-pet owners being in this middle column, that pet owners generally rated higher on scales such as self-rated like mental health and self-rated health, and general trustworthiness, and things as social support and like general social skills, while those that are non-pet owners score lower on things such as diagnosed mental disorders such as anxiety and depression. And so then another study by Karen Allen is pets compared to ACE inhibitors, which the generalization of the study encapsulates people with high blood pressures or blood pressure were treated with ACE inhibitors, and half of this group adopted pets and half did not as control for the study. And they all experienced lower resting blood pressure because of the ACE inhibitors. And those that with pets experienced smaller blood pressure spikes when they were tested than those without pets. And so we can see that a little bit here on this next slide. And it shows before linezolpril in pets and with linezolpril in pets. And ACE inhibitors lower resting blood pressure, but pets lower blood pressure increases that are due to mental stress. So people with high blood pressure were treated with these ACE inhibitors, and half of those adopted pets. And then when stressed, the people with the pets had smaller increases in blood pressure spikes. And you can see that in a little more detail here on the slide with and without the lisinopril, that on average, those with pets scored had less spikes in blood pressure and had an overall average and level blood pressure rate compared to those without pets. So in conclusion, the school has been inefficient in assisting their students with their mental health problems. The board has been repeatedly been made aware of this issue, but they still continue to do nothing to make an impact in the lives of their students here, at least a super significant impact. So in response, we're taking it into our own hands by creating the solution to solve, or at least help to solve, the mental health crisis that lingers amongst the students here on campus. So we have proposed the solution of the virtual pet adoption event, because it still is COVID and we have to make it COVID safe. So this will help to increase pet adoption rates as well as decrease the mental health pandemic here on campus and those students that live off campus as well. So as it has been scientifically proven and significantly proven through our slides here today, that animals can be a positive influence in achieving this goal, and a very significant one at that. So completing this project would help the Adair County Humane Society, as well as helping students here on campus achieving these goals, that of being higher adoptions and lower mental health issues here on campus. And so that is our presentation. And then here is our citations. And that's it.